Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a comparison between the Leica M11 and the Fujifilm GFX 100S. Now this is a complete mismatch of a comparison. It's not meant to be taken seriously. The Fuji is a professional high-end medium format camera system. It can be used like a workhorse. It's an incredible camera system, possibly one of the best, if not the best medium format system currently out right now. I mean, it's got incredible autofocus, beautiful image quality, video features. It's basically, Fujifilm put everything they could in this little camera, and I love what they've done with it. Leica, on the other hand, I wouldn't personally classify it as a professional camera. It's not something that sits in the same category for me, and it's more of like a luxury camera that you use because you enjoy photography. That's what I think it is, and I love shooting with the Leica M11, but it's not the same, so this is a mismatch, not meant to be taken seriously. There are a few things I really enjoy about the Leica. The kind of compact size. I know the ergonomics do suck and some of you may disagree, but I don't like the ergonomics on the Leica. But there's something about it which I just really enjoy shooting with. The manual focus, the way everything works, the split prism in the viewfinder. I love shooting with the Leica, and the back of the screen. The back of the screen on the Leica is just beautiful. Every time you take a picture, images on the back of the screen look stunning, and you can flick through images with the touchscreen. It's just really well implemented, the touchscreen anyway, and I love that. It's got a beautiful weight to it. I like the little touches that they do with the Leica series. Whenever they update it, they kind of do little incremental updates, but it works for them. With the Fuji, like I said, probably the best medium format camera system out right now. But there is one thing that I really did not like about the Fuji GFX, and probably a lot of Fuji cameras, and that is the back of the screen. The back of the screen on the GFX 100S is really poor. Whenever you take a picture and you look at the back of the screen, the images looked ugly, like really ugly, and it's really demoralizing. You don't want to show clients, you kind of like want to hide it away, and it makes you think, oh wait, the images just look horrible. But then I'll bring it home, I'll put it onto my screen, and it'll be like, oh wait, the images look amazing. It wasn't, the images are great, it's just the back of the screen sucks. So I hope that Fujifilm updates that in like a future release or something. Back of the screen, if you could just, make that better, that would be great. But anyway, this comparison, we're going to be focusing predominantly on colors. We're not going to be looking at every aspect when it comes to image quality. We're not going to be looking at dynamic range and sharpness and those kinds of things. We're going to be focusing predominantly on colors. And we've done a couple of shoots. We've done multiple shoots actually. We've taken a whole bunch of images, and I thought we'd quickly jump onto the computer and see what these images look like. So here we have the images opened up in Lightroom now, and I just want to clarify something very quickly. All of the images were processed in Capture One. None of these files were processed in Lightroom. In fact, these aren't even RAW files. These are all PSD files. As you can see, it says .psd, and that's because all of the images were processed in Capture One, converted to PSD files, and then brought into Lightroom just for the side-by-side. So Capture One was used throughout this comparison. Just thought I'd mention that in case anyone wants to get a little annoyed in the comments. Hopefully we can avoid that. So both images over here, we've got Leica on the left, Fuji on the right, and I think it's pretty obvious to see the major differences in color. I think Fuji is doing a much better job overall in this particular scene. Fuji's doing a fantastic job. The skin tones look great. The jacket looks more neutral. It's got an overall neutral tone. The only thing that I would maybe point out is that the green tones in the Leica, like on the top over here, and also in the back of the scene over here, the green tones in the Leica are just a little bit more saturated, a little bit warmer, and they just pop a little bit more. However, in the skin tones and in the jacket, Leica's leaning heavily into the magenta and reddish tones, a little bit too much, I think, in comparison to Fuji. Fuji's doing a brilliant job. Very neutral, very natural looking color, and it looks great. Even if we zoom into the hair over here, you can see how Fuji's doing a fantastic job at rendering those tones, those darker tones in the hair color. Leica, however, leaning a little bit too much into the magentas, and it's just giving it a slightly less than accurate look in comparison to what Annette's hair actually looks like. For this next comparison, we shot this in a more controlled scenario, so we're using one light with a backdrop, and from this distance there isn't a huge difference in terms of the colors. However, there are some subtle differences. First of all, the green tone. So even in the last comparison, the green tones were just a little bit muted and they weren't coming through quite as effectively as they were on the Leica. However, Leica had the magenta cast. But anyway, the green tones. So if you look over here on the Leica and the Fuji, Leica's doing a brilliant job with the green tones again, and Fuji, it kind of looks like a dead leaf. You know, it's muddy, it's brown, and it doesn't look that great. The green tones on the Leica are fantastic, and it's consistently doing a great job. Also, there isn't that magenta cast in this image that the Leica had in the first comparison. However, there is a slight magenta shift with the Fuji. All of the images were set to daylight white balance, and I think the red tones, like over here on the hand, for example, the red tones have been pushed a little too far, and even in the skin tones, I misfocused a little bit on the Leica, but even in the skin tones over here, you can see how the reds have just been pushed a little bit too much, and I think that the magenta shift is just a little bit too harsh, just a tiny bit too harsh on the Fuji, but it's still doing a better job than what Leica did in the first comparison. However, in this control test, I think Leica definitely is doing a better job. And even when you look at the hair, like the colors on the hair, I think the contrast is just a little bit too harsh. And that's why you're not seeing those detailed transitions between the tones that you are with the Leica. Like over here, the way that the colors kind of shift and go into different tones is looking far better than what it does on the Fujifilm. The Fujifilm just isn't rendering these tones in a detailed fashion. It's kind of just, it's a little bit blocky and a little bit patchy as well. For this third comparison, this is where I think Fujifilm goes a little bit downhill, and that's when it comes to darker skin tones. With darker skin tones, Fujifilm really, really struggles. Leica is doing an incredible job, and this is something that I've noticed throughout my shooting or my time with Leica cameras over the few years anyway, and I find Leica does an incredible job when it comes to darker skin tones, and it's able to pick out the tones more effectively. Like, this may look subtle. First of all, I mean, from this distance, you're probably going to notice the contrast difference. Contrast is harsh on Fuji. It's pretty harsh, and you know, the hair, a lot of the detail or the color in the hair just gets lost. Like, it's just not there, and it just looks a bit like, look at this section over here. Look at the way the colors kind of go in and out, and over here it almost looks gray. Like, it doesn't have that tonality. It doesn't look good. It looks pretty ugly. And then even over here, it's just a little bit patchy in terms of the colors. However, key area to focus on is over this area, over this section here where there's no makeup, and we can actually look at the skin tones. And I mean, of course, it's not in focus, but we're looking at the colors more than the detail. But you can see how Fuji just looks, one, it looks a little bit harsh because of the contrast, but also it's got a magenta shift to it. Like, it doesn't look like what dark skin tone looks like. And even the green over here, like the dress, the colors with the dress and the skin, Leica's done a brilliant job there, but Fuji, like the green tones look really muted and leaning a little bit into the gray, and the skin tones just look a little bit purple, just a tiny bit. And in my experience, I find that Fuji doesn't do a great job with darker skin. Like, even if you look at the background over here, like the background is not the fact that Leica's leaning too much into the greens, because you can see the reddish magenta tones over here in the background, and Leica's able to pull those details and those colors out really well, whereas Fuji just looks a little muted and it's not there. Like, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to tell on YouTube, but I'm going to make these images available to you, and you can see how the reddish, magenta, purple and all those tones working extremely well on the Leica. I'm just going to bring this a little bit closer there. However, with the Fuji, it's just a little flat. And finally, we took a controlled shot with a color checker just to be on the safe side and make sure that we're doing things correctly in terms of colors and getting things right. But this time, I didn't use daylight white balance. I white balance according to the color checker, and still Fuji isn't doing a great job when it comes to those darker tones. So imagine if this was, you know, a darker skin color. Fuji is heavy into the magentas. Like, look at the difference. Leica is doing such a good job. I actually picked up this plush toy, brought it near my screen in, you know, in good lighting conditions in my office over here, and it looked virtually the same. Leica's done a brilliant job at getting those colors out from the toy. It doesn't have a magenta cast to it, and it looks fantastic. Ignore the fact that I misfocused, because I focused on the color checker for the GFX, and I focused on the toy for the Leica. But again, this is not a sharpness or detail comparison, so we're not looking at those points. We're looking strictly at the colors that the Leica and Fujifilm are producing. And I have to say, Leica is doing a brilliant job. The M11, amazing camera, and I think that it's doing a fantastic job with colors. This is something that I consistently recognize with Leica M series cameras. I think the first image, the lighting was changing quite a lot, so maybe, you know, maybe that's a little bit of a blip on the side of the Leica and a bit of a win on the Fuji side. But overall, especially in controlled scenarios, when you're shooting with control light and with a color checker, you know, white balance according to the color checker passport, still the Fuji, I'm going to say, is doing a pretty poor job rendering colors effectively. And I tried several profiles. This was the best one. It was the closest to what it actually looks like, and the accuracy of it. But yeah, Leica is doing a much better job in that regard. So there you have it. That's how the Leica and the Fujifilm compare against one another. And personally, I think that Leica does a better job overall when it comes to colors. I think that Fujifilm would benefit greatly by having a commercial grade color profile. I think that being stuck with color profiles based on film is just less effective. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't use the GFX for commercial work. Obviously you can. It's an incredible camera. I just think that it would go a long way if Fujifilm produced a commercial grade profile for its GFX series of cameras. I know that some of you may want to say that, well, you're shooting in RAW, you've got 16-bit RAW files, why don't you just adjust it in post? And it's not that simple. It takes a lot of skill, a lot of time, and a lot of years of dedication to understand and be able to do something like that. I mean, that's why you have dedicated colorists and color graders. It takes a lot of skill, and if you've got that level of skill or that level of ability, then great. But I don't think most people have that level of skill, so having a commercial profile would go a long way in improving many people's workflow for a particular type of work. Also, adjusting the white balance, not the same, because white balance, you're only looking for the white point. It's a singular thing that you're looking for, but it makes a global change. And that also, I've tried it, not as effective. It doesn't really work. So profile from Fujifilm, that would go a long way. It would be brilliant and very appreciated. Other than that, obviously the GFX is an incredible camera. It's a camera that Fujifilm has done brilliant things with, and I'm very pleased to see what Fujifilm is doing in the medium format division. They've brought the price down. They've also brought it a lot closer to full frame. So fantastic stuff. Leica, I love Leica cameras as well. They're beautiful. They're just a joy to shoot with. But yeah, that's been the comparison, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them below. Obviously, hit the like button, subscribe, share this video, and hope to see you all in the next one. Thank you.